My name's Chris, and welcome to the acreage. This week's a little bit different, partially because last week was a bit of a screw up. I managed to upload only half the video because I was so tired after editing, I completely screwed up. Ironic, of course, that it was my best performing video yet. Thanks, James. But it was also not exactly what I wanted. It missed some of the core information that I wanted to sort of share to be as that overview of the property. This week, I'm also going to add in more of what I want to do here specifically, as far as what the house is going to look like, what I want to put in for buildings, and what the overall plan is. And otherwise, I wanted to do a fair bit of work here this week, but I wasn't expecting it to be as hot as it is. And basically, in the morning it's hot, in the afternoon it's hot, in the evening it's hot. There's nothing you can do about it. And I don't do really well in the heat. So I'm going to do my best this week. But I'm trying to get a lot of the editing done at the beginning of the week this week, so that way I don't make the same mistake at the end of the week. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Like and subscribe if you haven't already, and enjoy the video. I thought it was important to take some time and describe the whole property and be able to give frames of reference, so that way I can say, well, when I'm going over to this area, you know where that is, and I can create maps that go along with that, so that way that you're always able to understand where I am relative to everything else, because the property is really big. In that direction, I can, if it wasn't for the water, I could walk almost 2,000 feet before I hit the edge of the property. And because of the size, you really need to have some way to refer to the different bits of it. As I've mentioned before, the property is 220 acres and part of an unorganized township. While it's unorganized, there is a planning board for the area, which means that you have all the downsides of rules with none of the upsides of services. But even so, our taxes are relatively low, and what you're allowed to do here is fairly permissive relative to a lot of jurisdictions. And while you need to get the permit, the process is relatively straightforward as long as you're building the house first. So overall, I have really big plans for this place. I know what I want to do here. I want to experiment. I want to try different things. I want to build a whole bunch of different kinds of things, all of which is going to be fodder for YouTube. But to do that, I need to have infrastructure. And episodes 2 and 3 were supposed to be simply about building that infrastructure to be able to get started. Unfortunately, it's a little more challenging than I originally intended, and the heat and the bugs has really gotten out of hand. Next week, I'm filing for the permit, so that way hopefully I can get started on building. Quick overview how the maps work. I've collected material from a few different sources, including my own videos, to create a topographic map of my property. And along with that is some additional information that gives a clearer picture of what the property is like from a human scale. And the biggest one is a slope map. So the slope map shows which areas are a really high slope and which areas are flat. White being high slope, black being no slope. And I've overlaid this on all of the maps that I'm showing, so that way you can see the different features and how they relate. So when you see a really large piece of white, you know that there's a cliff or something similar there. I've also created a zone map, so that way you can clearly see where I'm talking about relative to everything else. So as I said in the first video, I'm in Northern Ontario. And I wanted to be here because, well, first of all, I grew up here and my wife's job is here. My job can be just about anywhere. But nevertheless, being here is something that I've always wanted. I wanted to be in the bush, in a private location where I could pretty much do what I wanted and experiment and play around and do all the things that ultimately you're going to get to watch me do here. But I also had to be relatively close to the city, so that way my wife was able to go to work and not have to have an excessive drive. And this property was the one. This area is hardiness zone 4. That means that it can be really cold in the winter, which not all plants can deal with, but it's certainly better than the far north of Northern Ontario, where a lot of things just won't grow. Over the years, it's gotten progressively warmer, which means that we can grow more crops, peaches, corn, The problem with that, though, is that it also gets really, really hot and gets drier, which means that we have more risk of fire. In the summer, it can be relatively hot, up to 35 degrees Celsius with a humidex of 42 to 44. And in the winter, it can be crazy cold. The coldest I personally experienced was minus 42 with a wind chill of minus 55, I think it was. It was really, really cold. We can get a lot of snow in the winter, upwards of 12 feet, and that varies a lot year to year. The length of winter also varies a fair bit, but it's getting a lot more unstable. When I was a kid, it was actually fairly predictable weather-wise. You could rely on 4 months of winter. You can rely on August being hot. You can rely on May and June being relatively wet. And generally speaking, the timing of bugs and last frost, snow melt, it was all fairly consistent, plus or minus 2 or 3 weeks. But now it's easily plus or minus 2 months. And that makes it a lot more difficult to plan for anything. Almost the whole property is the same kind of rock. It's a magmatic gneiss, which is a combination of silica, mica, and a few other minerals. It's a metamorphic rock, which means that after it was originally created, it was heated and twisted and put under a whole lot of pressure and moved around and crushed and so forth and so on until it created the type of rock that we have here. 20,000 years ago, this area was under almost 2 kilometers of ice, and that's what gave most of this area its rugged topography. The ice basically scoured the rock, and wherever it found a weak point, it was able to dig in and make a gully. As a result of the glaciation, there was obviously a huge amount of weight pressing down on the land. And when that ice melted, the rock rebounded. And when it rebounded, it cracked and broke and created several fault lines throughout the area, including one that goes through the property. It's almost certainly not active, though there have been some small magnitude 3 earthquakes in the area within the last 10 years, most of which would just be more of that decompression from glacial times. This property, I think I mentioned before, was logged 20 or 30 years ago. And before that, it was logged at least 3 or 4 more times. That one of the primary exports of this area was lumber until mining started. As a result of that, a lot of the topsoil was taken away, a lot of the rock was made bare. So for wildlife here, pretty much anything that you'd have anywhere else in Ontario. We have deer, and for the first time this week, I saw a deer on my trail cam. We have moose, which I see all the time. We have bears, lots of bears, and in our case, they're just black bears. We have fox, we have wolverine, we have coyotes and wolves, neither of which I've seen on the trail cam. And porcupine, squirrels, chipmunks, that sort of thing. All kinds of different birds that you would normally have in northern Ontario. Somewhere relatively not too far from here, there's also elk. But those are relatively narrow ranges, and I don't think they've come to this part of the province just yet. The forests around here are boreal, which means that there is a combination of deciduous trees, trees that lose their leaves, and coniferous trees, trees that don't. Pine and spruce are the coniferous, poplar, which is also known as aspen, birch, maple, oak, throughout this area. And it can be very, very dense, like what you see behind me, where it's very difficult to move through it. And in other areas, it can be very wide open, where the canopy is established enough that you can walk without really getting too many sticks in the face. Just a quick overview of the different zones. There's the useless turd, front swamp, core, highlands, lower core, razorback, the interior, creek, ridge, lowlands, canyon country, the backstrap, and the lakefront. And again, if you want to know more about each of these sections, you can take a look at the last video I did. Wherever I can, I'm going to be building with what the property gives me. Trees, obviously. There's a lot of stone here that I'm going to be using in the house. There's the gravel that I've talked about before. And of course, there's sun and wind. Generally speaking, I'll probably be using wood for heat. I have the ability to have a grid tie because the power line goes down the road along the core. But to access that is going to be really expensive. Last time I got an estimate for putting in power, it was around 20 grand, and it wasn't nearly as far. So while I could conceivably do most of the work burying the line myself, that would save a fair bit, it's still going to be super expensive. So one of the reasons I'm looking at solar and wind is purely a pragmatic one, because it's going to be about the same amount of money regardless. We are relatively remote, and what comes with that is the power goes out fairly often. The trees fall on the line and the power goes out. So having a system that really doesn't care is really appealing. Internet is a problem. There's wireless internet, but it's slow. And the only real alternative is Starlink. I've used it here before. I canceled the subscription relatively recently, but I still have the dish, so I can reconnect at any time. So originally I wanted to put a house up on the highlands, and then I would have a view forever. But the problem with doing that is it means that I would be completely exposed to straight line winds. If a tornado ever came through here, there would be nothing between me and all the debris that it picked up. If there was a fire, I would be in the firestorm. So I decided to bring it down to the area that's just over there. In so doing, I found a location that is higher than the area around it. So it's sort of a lump, which means that all the water is going to run away from that. It's still below, obviously, the highlands and some of the other ridges that are around, but the water can run away and I don't have to worry about it. There's a meadow just behind you, in fact, that I want to turn into a pond, and I can use that pond both for cooling the house and also for fire suppression if I ever need it. The trees, they're flammable, but I'm going to move the trees back from the house so that way there's nothing really combustible nearby. And there is a feature which is really hard to see in the summer. There's a ridge that runs just to the side of where the house is on the prevailing wind side that is going to be the same height as the house. And that means that any straight line winds that are coming are going to be pushed up and over. And that's going to help protect the house from any serious wind events. And nothing's a guarantee. I'm going to try and build it so that way it's protected. But nevertheless, I want to do my best to make sure that my choices now aren't regrets later. The rock under the house site is about 2 feet thick, but it's solid bedrock underneath. Once I clear that off and pin footings to the rock, I never have to worry about them moving ever again. The house that I'm looking at building is about 2,000 square feet. Like I said, I'm planning on using trees where I can, but I'm not looking to build necessarily a traditional log home. Along with that, I want to try and make the house be as passive as I can within the boundaries of what I can afford to build. That means that it's very airtight and very well insulated. So that way it stays cool in the summer and stays warm in the winter with a minimum amount of energy used. And part of the reason for that is I want to live here for the rest of my life. I want this to be my forever home. And so I'm thinking towards when I'm old and frail and not able to do a lot of work, like chopping wood and that sort of thing. And the less energy I need to keep the house going, the easier that's going to be. The center of the house is going to be a large parallel stone wall. The reason for that is, well, it's going to be strong as anything and also serve as a storm shelter if we ever need it. But it's also thermal mass, which is going to basically be this large thing that has to heat up and cool down before the rest of the house heats up and cools down, and makes it so that way I have to spend less energy at peak heating and cooling times. That's going to make it a lot more comfortable and require less energy overall. And then the rest of the house is going to be log walls. And I'm not going to do just a straight log wall. I actually want to do a double log wall so that there's log on the inside, log on the outside, and insulation in the middle. I'm also looking at a couple other ideas with either using aircrete or styrofoam, recycled styrofoam, as a insulative material in the walls. So that way I can save a fair amount of money. I'm also looking at ways of making the house as fireproof as possible. So that way I don't have to worry about fire if I happen not to be here. That if the house isn't flammable, it's not going to burn. Roof rafters are going to be trees. And some engineering is going to have to be done to figure out the exact size and spacing of those trees. But overall, I'm not too worried about it. On one side is going to be sort of the regular living space. And then on the other side is going to be bedrooms, utility rooms, office, that sort of thing. And I'm going to build a small second floor over the top of the double rock walls that are going to be an extra bedroom and some extra office space and a little bit of extra storage. Overall, the house that I want to build is bigger than I probably absolutely need. But the cost of going from a 1,500 square foot house to a 2,000 square foot house to a 2,500 square foot house is actually not really that big when you're getting the materials from the land. Obviously, it's more work, but that's free to me. I'm going to do it anyway. So I don't have to worry about it. And then I have a house that's a little bit bigger. And then ultimately, I'm leaving something valuable behind for my son. The house itself is going to be slab on grade, which is part of the reason why it's going to be as big as it is. My current house is 1350 square feet on the main floor, but it has a full finished basement. And I'm looking at having something that's roughly the same size because we've lived there for 15 years and it suits us perfectly. But I'm definitely thinking towards that old age issue where, well, who knows, maybe I'll be in a wheelchair or my wife will be in a wheelchair. And being slab on grade means we don't have to worry about access to anything important within the house that can't be done while in a wheelchair. All of the doors are going to be 36-inch doors. The hallways are going to be wide. So it's going to be a very accessible home. It's sheltered from all directions. As I've mentioned before, it's sheltered from the wind on the one side. It's far enough back from the downhill side of the core to the front swamp that faces the road. So while you'll still be able to hear cars going by, they're not going to be able to see you. They're not going to be able to hear you talking. One of the things that always frustrated me a lot when I was driving around in this area when I was young was seeing how people would buy these big tracts of land and build a house right on the road. So that way people are driving by and the dust and the noise is just right there. And one of the advantages of having something this big is I have a little bit of flexibility. For the other buildings, I'm going to start with a sleep camp, which is a technical definition. Basically, it's a place where you sleep that doesn't have a kitchen or a bathroom in it. And there's going to be several other sheds that are of different sizes for different purposes. Some are going to be pure storage. Some of them are going to be small workshops. Eventually, I want to have my office to be in a separate building, separate from the house. I want to have a wood shop, a metal shop, and a fabrication shop, which normally you would do as a single structure, like a 40 by 60. But in my case, because I'm looking to save money and do it with local materials, I'm probably going to do several 14 by 20 structures. And those are going to then be tied together. So they're basically built really close together with a covered courtyard that I can go from building to building, share some heat and power infrastructure. And I'm guessing I'm probably going to put that a little ways away from the house, but still on the ridge because I want to build on solid rock. And the best place to do that on the core is on the ridge that faces the lower core. On the ridge that would be blocking the house from the prevailing wind, a little further down is where I want to put my office and / man cave. I love having a view. I like to be able to see far. While I'm not going to be able to have that from the house, I can put that up on that little ridge and be able to see everything. And over time, I want to put several gazebos throughout the property, not the kind that I was trying to build before, but real permanent gazebos where I have a place where I can go that's screened in and covered, and I can go up there and I can just enjoy what I've got, have different views. I want to put one up on top of the highlands. I want to put one on the Razorback. I want to build a log cabin on the inland section. And I want to build a sauna and dock down at the lakefront. I also want to build a sauna close to the house. I'm Finnish heritage and I love me a good sauna. If anybody asks, a real sauna is 150°C. Anything else is just a hot room. Near the house, probably going to want to put a garage just so that way we have somewhere to park that's out of the elements. So that way when my wife leaves in the morning, she doesn't need to scrape the car off and it just makes life easier. Whether it's a full-fledged garage or just a covered awning, time will tell. I mentioned that I want to put in a sawmill, which also means putting a sawmill building. I imagine I'm going to be milling up tens of thousands of board feet of logs and lumber, and having a place where I can do that is relatively easily accessed by the backhoe. So that way, for whatever it takes to get the logs here, I can use the backhoe to lift the logs and put it on the sawmill. And in fact, my current instinct is right there. Obviously, there's going to be things like wood storage and just general sheds for random miscellaneous stuff, but it is what it is. I also, at some point, fairly early, I think, I want to put in a she shed for my wife. My wife loves to read, oftentimes finds that she has nowhere that she can do her own hobbies, whether it's sewing or reading or really whatever she wants. And so I want to give her a structure where she can go. She doesn't have to worry about myself or my son making it a mess. And so that way she has a place that's genuinely hers. Along the way, I'm going to be putting in several gardens. I'm probably going to put in a hoop house. I also want to build a greenhouse. I'm really interested in the effort of self-reliance and getting as much as I can from the property of building something that I can grow food in year round. My wife loves her greens, so I would like nothing more than having a place where I can be growing lettuce and tomato and other staples year round. It might not be a lot of food, but it's enough to keep our vegetable costs basically at zero. There's a lot of work that has to be done with trails. I love cross-country skiing. I like hiking, and I like being up and about and going around and exploring. So part of that is going to be making a full trail network on the property. No problem at all to have 8 to 10 kilometers of ski/hiking trails on the property and looping around in different ways. And that's something that I've always wanted to have. And I find that I never go skiing because it's always such a pain to go out, drive to the place. Sometimes they're not open. Where's my skis? Having a place here where I've got all that gear, it's ready to go. I leave the house, put my skis on, and go. It's something that I've wanted to have since I was a kid. The rustic cabin that I want to put in the interior is where I want to build something that harks to the last 150 years of log cabin building. That's all saddle notches. It exists in order to fulfill that childhood dream of building a log cabin like that. That being said, it's a relatively low priority. What I need to be doing now is getting the infrastructure so that I can be here full time. And then hopefully in a couple years, I can start building that cabin. Most of the stuff that I'm going to build here, I want it to look like log cabins. They're just not necessarily going to be the highest effort version of a log cabin. And I think overall, the most important thing that comes from that comes from this channel specifically, is the ability to build a community so that way the ideas that I have can be shared with you guys, and you can come back to me with, oh, well, why don't you try? Didn't you know about? Couldn't you do this? And in my entire work history, the best things I've ever come up with are in conversation with others who knew things that I don't. One of the next things that's going to be really important is building the bridge over the creek. I've started buying materials for that, so you start seeing that over the next couple weeks. That's important because I want to be able to get to the other side of the creek and explore what's available there. I think there's going to be a lot of really good quality building materials in the form of logs, and going over there, exploring, mapping what I need to do, which trees are the ones that I want to take down, so that way I can systematically plan what I'm going to do come winter. Because the only time I can get any materials from that side over is when the creek is completely frozen, probably end of January. So having planned out, these are the 50 trees that I want to take, this is where they are, this is the gear that I'm going to need to get it done, is going to make it a lot easier come winter to actually execute. Because up until now, a lot of what I've been doing here has been struggling in the face of the perceptions of what I thought was here. But now that I'm here, I'm really starting to get a grasp on both how I'm failing and how I can succeed. And part of it is planning, and part of it is trying different things and making sure that I've thought through all the problems. But one thing I know for sure from my own experience is that winter is the time when I'm going to shine. I can't wait until mid-September when things really start to cool off, because I no longer have to worry about the heat. And assuming we don't get an enormous amount of snow, it means I'll start getting a lot more done. In a way, July and August are going to be a bit of the experimentation phase of sorting out things like heat for next year and how to make sure that I'm planning properly, how I'm not rushing, and working out all the bugs from the filming and editing process, just making the whole thing become a little bit more routine and predictable, so that way I'm not constantly getting in my own way. I'm someone who has an open mind, and I'm constantly thinking not about, well, it's my idea, I want to do it my way, but what is the better way? If somebody has more information, I'm all ears. Having a community where there's a lot of people who are interested in the lifestyle that I'm choosing, the content that I'm creating, the things that I'm making, really creates a new opportunity to find people that I might never have known otherwise. And a lot of that making, a lot of that creation may end up being a different channel, just because I don't know that it necessarily fits really well in the Homestead theme. But nevertheless, it's something that I want to do here. And one of the reasons I haven't done it nearly enough, as far as I'm concerned, in my life is because I've never really had the space to do it. That I've always been limited by how much I could spread out and have this project and that project, and it might be ADHD in the end, but it really works for me and allows me to come up with a lot of different ideas because I'm constantly exposing myself to new process, new learning, new ways of going about things. And that's what this place is. It's 220 acres of possibility. And the idea that doing this all on YouTube might mean that I can earn a living just doing what excites me. Obviously, there's work. It's not going to be always easy all the time. I'm going to make stupid mistakes like uploading only half the video one week. But I really feel like there's possibility here. The last couple of weeks have really made me feel that possibility is it's tangible. It's almost there. It's exciting. But for all of that, thanks for watching this week. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, and all those wonderful things. Follow me on Instagram if you'd like. And we'll see you next week. Have a good one.